The Downing Street Christmas parties are outrageous. It's the Prime Minister laughing in our faces. But while we've all been focused on that, something much, much bigger than that has been slipped past us, where the government is taking away our liberties on an industrial scale. You know those documentaries you've seen about a dictator's rise to power? And there's always a bit in the documentary where you think, why didn't they stop him? They could have stopped him when there was still time. That's the bit we're at. We currently have a bill going through its final stages of Parliament, the police bill, which now contains measures which would effectively shut down protest in this country. We'll be banned from locking on or indeed holding on to anything in pursuit of protest, one of the most important protest tactics around the world, used throughout history. You can't interfere in any way with the construction of any new major infrastructure. So you can't protest against a road being built, an airport being expanded. New stop and search powers, which the police will be able to deploy against anyone who they suspect might be carrying equipment for a protest, and indeed other powers where they can stop and search us without suspicion. But even worse than that is this power to ban named people from going to any kind of protest. You put them on a list, and those people are then banned from all engagement with protest, even from being able to go on the internet and talk about protest, anything like that, you'll be banned, even though you've committed no crime. Our basic democratic liberties are being taken away from us. So obviously, the media, the establishment, Parliament, they're all up in arms, they're in uproar over this. In your dreams, you could hear a pin drop. Almost no discussion at all of these massive dictators' powers. Parliament is almost silent on it. The Labour Party is almost silent on it. The press is censoring itself. We don't need that next stage towards autocracy where government censor the press, because it's already happening. And what's very interesting about this is that we have a whole discourse of freedom on the right. We have all these freedom warriors like Julia Hartley-Brewer and Lawrence Fox and Toby Young and Steve Baker and Oliver Dowden and Nadine Dorries, all these people who position themselves as being in favour of liberty. Not a squeak from any of them about these massive truncations of our freedoms. The only freedoms they care about are their own. It's not just the police bill which has been slipped past us while we've all been focusing elsewhere. It's also the Nationality and Borders Bill, an unbelievably oppressive piece of legislation where it enables, on a whim, the government to take away your citizenship, to take away your passport. And this could apply to up to 5 million people, predominantly people of colour. It's enacted the fantasy which people like the British National Party and the National Front used to entertain decades ago. It's actually turned it into policy. And it's gone through with scarcely a scrap of coverage. Again and again now, the government is passing these massive, history-changing bills, and the media is looking elsewhere. How can this be? What's going on here? What is this hypnosis which we seem to be under? Media and government, government and media, the same figures go round and round. And they use all the skills and all the contacts which they accumulated as journalists and deploy that cleverness on behalf of their new political masters. Allegra Stratton is a classic example of this. She worked in newspapers and television before becoming the Prime Minister's spokesperson. She was the one who was caught laughing about that Christmas party and had to resign. Basically the fall guy for Johnson, because the favourite Tory blood sport is shooting the messenger. But she was indicative of this meshing of media and government. If the media exists for a purpose, it is to hold power to account. But the great majority of the media reinforces power. Boris Johnson is the most dangerous Prime Minister we've had in the entire democratic era. He creates this impression of being relaxed and funny and spontaneous and bumbling and incompetent. It's all calculated. And he disarms people with this impression of bumbling incompetence, but he's absolutely ruthless when it comes to the pursuit of power. And he senses weakness in our political system like a shark smells blood. And so he homes in and exploits that weakness to great effect. If there's one thing that the history of the past 100 years tells us, it is beware of the clowns. People who seem ridiculous are the most dangerous people of all in politics. We weren't sufficiently aware of the dangers of the clowns, and we elected one as Prime Minister. The whole thrust of unaccountable power is that you can do things that other people can't. You don't have to abide by the rules because you're powerful. You're above all that. It's the other people who do. And so we have this situation in this country where the Prime Minister and his cronies are mocking us. As we abide by the COVID rules, they just ignore them and laugh in our faces. And while they're doing so, they impose the most draconian legislation in living memory on the rest of us. This is how dictatorship works, and we are sliding towards it at the moment. The motive power of dictatorship is that there's one rule for the elite and a completely different rule for the people. We need to use every tool at our disposal to resist this great power grab that's going on. The mainstream media has completely failed us on this issue. It's failed to give it anything like the coverage it requires. And this is where the alternative media steps in. So please support Double Down News by becoming a supporter on Patreon.